Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, Mr. Chief Prosecutor, Mr. Assistant Attorney General, Mark Torre Jr., Mr. and Mrs. Torre, and most especially, ladies and gentlemen of this jury. Thank you. Thank you from Mark Torre Jr., his family, and our defense for your sacrifices spent coming to court daily in this case. Your time spent in court carefully devoting your attention to all of the different witnesses that came on and presented evidence. We appreciate your oath and your commitment to serve as a fair and impartial juror in this case and to listen to two sides of the story before rendering your verdict. On January 18th, we commenced jury selection and trial in this case. Nearly 6 weeks later, 15 days of testimony, after 56 witnesses, several recalled, after dozens and dozens of exhibits, hundreds and hundreds of pages of records, call logs, reports, and pictures, lots of pictures, all have been admitted, mostly by stipulation, as evidence in this case. We're finally at the close of the case when you will soon begin deliberations to decide the fate of Mark Torre Jr. At this stage, the prosecutor has just given his argument, and after I'm done, because the government bears the burden of proof in this case, he gets to come back one last time and make one more argument in rebuttal. Then you will be instructed, or charged, as we say, by His Honor, and he'll give you the law as it relates to this case, and he'll tell you how to apply it to the facts of this case. So, as this is the last time I will be able to address you, I plead for your indulgence and attention one last time. As I ask you to find Mark Torre not guilty of murder, not guilty of shooting, or intentionally hurting her piano in any way. In the beginning of the case, I reminded you, you were all selected to serve on this jury after being asked a number of questions. You all affirmed and swore that you could be fair and impartial, and that you will decide this case solely and strictly on the evidence as you see it in court, and you hear it in court, and you receive it in court, and the law, as His Honor will tell it to you. I asked you to listen to both sides and not make a judgment, not allow passions or prejudices or outside influences to influence your verdict. Decide it solely and strictly on what you heard in this courtroom. You will recall this case begins with an indictment, charges. And charges are just that. Charges are just that. You've been instructed several times. The indictment is not evidence. It's merely a charge of telling the defendant what he is facing, what he is charged with. The defendant is presumed innocent. He can assert his right to remain silent, not to produce any evidence, have his right to counsel with him, and rely solely on the government to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. I have a first reminder to jurors in that the indictment is not evidence and it's just charges. And I want to clear up a misconception that's commonly held out there amongst the general public. And we know this because in all the cases that the defense lawyers do, we normally interview jurors and ask them, about the case and what made them decide it. The most significant and common response that we have from jurors is that he's been charged with something, so he must be guilty of something. That is simply not true. That is incorrect. The biggest mistake, the biggest fake news out there about criminal trials, criminal cases, is that just because he's charged, he must be guilty of something. They wouldn't charge him. They wouldn't charge him if they didn't find him, if he wasn't guilty of something. But in the facts of this case, the rush to judgment by the prosecution and the police in this case is just one other reason why you must acquit. At the end of this case, today, this afternoon, if the government has failed to prove each and every element of each and every crime charged, you must find the defendant not guilty. If you have a reasonable doubt, it's quite simple. If you have a reasonable doubt that Mark Torre shot and killed Bert Piolo, you must acquit him of all charges. You'll be given the verdict forms and the jury instructions to take back with you. You're also given all the exhibits to take back with you. You'll have your notes, and perhaps these can assist in jogging your memory. Maybe you want to look at an exhibit or two, or want to look at testimony or some of the 911 calls, or whatever the case may be. Use your notes. We may need to replay testimony if you ask for it. The first thing you're going to go and do is to elect a foreperson. And then you're going to decide how to decide. The instructions given to you are all definitions, first of all. They tell you what the law is. They tell you what the government must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And I'd like to focus the beginning of my argument giving you the lesson on the law. What is the law? What must they show beyond a reasonable doubt to prove murder, manslaughter, or negligent homicide, or aggravated assault as a second-degree felony, or even aggravated assault as a third-degree felony? And we begin the jury instructions, as the court will read them to you, regarding culpability. How can a person commit a crime? He must first have a culpable mental state, a mens rea. He must either do it intentionally, recklessly under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life, committing manslaughter recklessly, committing negligent homicide through criminal negligence, intentionally committing aggravated assault, or intentionally committing aggravated assault as a third-degree felony. Those are the mental states. If we take a look at the definition of recklessly, you'll have a copy of this again with you. And the law is pretty clear. And it defines recklessly a person acts recklessly or is reckless with respect to attendant circumstances or the result of his conduct when he acts in awareness of a substantial risk that circumstances exist or that his conduct will cause the result, and his disregard is unjustifiable and constitutes a gross deviation from the standard of care that a reasonable person would exercise in this situation. That's a pretty high burden of proof. That's a pretty high burden. It's more than negligence. It's a little less than intentional, but it's reckless. Substantial risk. Disregard is unjustifiable. A gross deviation. The next very important instruction is under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life. When a person is charged with murder, the most serious crime on Guam, by the way, the most serious crime, murder, the government must prove not only that he caused the death recklessly, but under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life. How do we define that? The court will tell you. The requirement of committing homicide under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to human life does not focus on Mark's state of mind, but rather on the circumstances under which you find he acted. If in light of all the evidence you find that his acts would result in a probability as opposed to a mere possibility of death, you may find that he acted under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference. On the other hand, if you find that his acts would only result in a possibility of death, you must acquit him. Again, in order to find someone guilty of murder, two very, very important and high standards of proof. Reckless, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference. As we began the case, he was charged with murder and manslaughter. Now he's also charged with criminally negligent homicide. Negligent homicide means he caused the death negligently, as opposed to recklessly, or, which is manslaughter, or murder recklessly with extreme indifference. 3 levels of criminal homicide: murder, manslaughter, negligent homicide, the lesser offense of all. Murder. Homicide constitutes murder when it's committed recklessly, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference. Manslaughter. Manslaughter should be written there. Manslaughter is the next definition. It should say when it is committed recklessly, period. Homicide constitutes manslaughter when it is committed recklessly, period. Negligent homicide. Negligent homicide is when the death is committed by criminal negligence. Aggravated assault as a second-degree felony. If he recklessly causes or attempts to cause serious bodily injury to another, again, in circumstances manifesting extreme indifference. That phrase is very important. Very, very important. Aggravated assault is a third-degree felony, a lesser offense against this, if he just commits it recklessly. The most important jury instruction in all our law, however, is the definition of reasonable doubt. And you are instructed by the judge that the burden of proof, reasonable doubt, instruction reads, the law presumes the defendant to be innocent. A defendant, although accused, begins trial with a clean slate, with no evidence against him. The law permits nothing but legal evidence presented before the jury. That's where you always object, hearsay, that kind of stuff. Legal evidence presented to the jury to be considered in support of any charge against the accused. The presumption of innocence alone is sufficient to acquit the defendant, unless after a careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence, the jurors are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt of the defendant's guilt. It's not required that the government prove guilt beyond all possible doubt. The test is one of reasonable doubt. It is defined as follows. It is not a mere possible doubt, because everything relating to human affairs, depending on moral evidence, is open to some possible or imaginary doubt. It is that state of the case which, after the entire comparison and consideration of all the evidence, leaves the mind of the trier of fact in that condition that he cannot feel, cannot say, he feels an abiding conviction to a moral certainty of the truth of the charge. Leaves the mind of each of you in that condition that you cannot say you feel an abiding conviction to a moral certainty of the truth of the charge. Jury will remember, a defendant is never to be convicted on mere suspicion and conjecture. The burden is always on the prosecution to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The burden never shifts to the defendant, for the law never imposes upon a criminal defendant in a criminal case the burden or duty of calling any witnesses or producing evidence. If the jury, after careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence, has a reasonable doubt that he is guilty of the charge, you must acquit. If the jury views the evidence in the case as reasonably permitting either of two conclusions, one of innocence, the other guilty, the jury should adopt the conclusion of innocence. Let me repeat that. All things being equal, you look at this case and you say, if you view the evidence in the case as reasonably permitting either of two, innocent or guilty, you must acquit. if it's reasonable to think either conclusion is possible, that's not beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not beyond a reasonable doubt. You got to shift it beyond a reasonable doubt. But if you're looking at two sides to the story, and both sides are reasonably permitted as a conclusion. One says the innocent, the other is guilty, you must choose innocence. Why? That's the very definition. That's the very definition of reasonable doubt. Our defense in this case is a lot simpler than reasonable doubt. Our defense is simple. It's simply not a crime to try to stop a person from committing suicide. It's not self-defense. It's not defense of others. It's not even a crime. You won't get an instruction like that because there's no instruction for it. It's common sense. If he didn't try to take the gun and Bert didn't try to resist or kill himself, then he's not guilty of anything. If he's only trying to prevent a suicide. It's not against the law to go up to Two Lovers Point and when the guy's about to jump to try to save him and he falls off. Are you guilty of pushing him off? Somebody just did that a few weeks ago. Are you guilty of pushing him off if you're trying to save him? No. Same situation. Same situation. The question before you, did the government prove beyond reasonable doubt that Mark Torre recklessly and under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life shoot and kill Bert Yellow? You'll be instructed that motive is not an element of the crimes charged. Specifically, you'll be told by the judge that motive is not an element of the crimes charged and need not be shown. However, you may consider motive or the lack of motive as a circumstance in this case. I would add to that, ladies and gentlemen, that the absence of motive is a good indication that he's not guilty. The presence of motive is also a good indication that he might be guilty. Motive is a reason to shoot and kill him. If he had no reason whatsoever to shoot and kill Bert, it tends to prove he's not guilty of that. There is an absence, an utter absence, a deafening absence, if you will, of motive in this case. Motive, such as an argument over a mutual girlfriend, or their wives, or having an affair with their wives. Motive may come from having some argument over a girlfriend. Why would Mark shoot and kill a fellow officer, someone he considers a brother? Why? Conversely, a lack of motive tends to show no reason. Why would he shoot him? What reason would Mark have to lock and load the gun and fire it? If he wanted to shoot him and kill him, he likely could have. Scored the top score on this, fully trained. If he really wanted to kill him, he could have. There's simply no motive, no reason. If anything, both are GPD, both are SWAT, brotherhood. Mark respected him. And while they may not have hung out together at all before this night, clearly, very, very clearly, while they were hanging out, they were having a good time. Abandoned ship, 12:40 a.m. to 1:40 a.m. Sharing drinks, high-fiving, and I'm sure flirting with the women that were present, including Miss Baca. And while the prosecution spent its first few days of testimony regarding Beach Bar and abandoned ship, trying to show some type of angry, agitated, or belligerent Mark Torre, all we come away with is that both Bert and Mark, are drinking and having a good time. It's what the video shows. It's what all the witnesses say. At Beach Bar, Bert has his tab for the whole band. Yes, maybe 7 members. times 70 drinks. From 7 to 12, that's 10 drinks per person. 0.025 per drink. That's a 0.25 by the time you're done that night. Think about it. 70 drinks on the bar tab, 7 band members, average 10 per band member, 10 times 0.025 per drink, brings you up to the end of the night at 0.25. At abandoned ship, Bert's seen drinking again, clearly on the camera, doing shots, at least a few. The bartender, Fallon Group, testified she served them drinks, and what? Having a good time. Having a good time. Mark clearly had several drinks, pounded them at each bar, according to some witnesses, and certainly at abandoned ship, he too was seen drinking. No one who saw them that night could or would say that they were any type of arguments. The video shows a lot of abandoned ship. We saw it time and time again, and we even provided you still shots so that you could see what it shows there. Shows them both entering, and of course, I told you in the beginning, shows Bert taking a big sway as he enters, trying to get on his phone. Got a still shot of that. One thing that's noticeable as well in those still shots, take a look at Bert's shirt. A lot of this has been made about how that wound can cut, how the holes can come into the shirt. And it's very clear in that shirt, in that picture from Beach Bar. That shirt's a pretty big shirt. The size is in there, I believe it's large. For a 5'3" small guy, it was pretty much hanging on him. So if you're under the assumption that his shirt was very tight and it had to go this way and that way in order to make those folds, just take a look at the picture of him entering Beach Bar. Excuse me, abandoned ship. You'll see how big his shirt is. Take a look at the shirt itself. It's not some tight-fitting shirt on a small person like Bert. The evidence from abandoned ship dispels any motive, any argument. The only thing about abandoned ship we hear is that there are some atambaba, some comments made to his inferior, but there was no angry, drunken rage that the government referred to in its opening statement. No reason again at abandoned ship, showing a reason to kill. The absence of motive again, whose reason will doubt. In order to compare the law that's given in the instructions and the evidence of the testimony, we'd have to go through all that, and I plan to go through all that, but before we do that, I'd like to show you our own timeline. Because our own timeline shows a little bit different thing based on the WhatsApp messages, the phone call log, the testimony received. And we begin on Sunday, July 12th, 2015, early in the morning at about 2:43 a.m. Bert's getting home. Sunday morning, 3 in the morning, he's sending a WhatsApp to Flossie after a night out. You'll see Flossie's WhatsApp there. Between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., Mika testifies the family ate breakfast at Josie's Bak Choy. 10:21 a.m., Bert sends a message to his girlfriend, Abigail. Good morning, babe. She replies promptly, good morning, babe. Between 12 and 4, Mika Piolo reports leaving for the baby shower. And between 12:21 to 12:22 p.m., Bert and Abigail begin a long history of messages that whole afternoon while Bert's doing the plumbing. Getting into an argument, discussing the nature of their relationship, where it's going, is it going anywhere, do you really want this? Keep in mind, just a week before, Bert's son showed his mom the text message between the two of them. Something about, I'm off, okay babe. Mika recalls seeing that from her son and tells Bert, quit texting her. As if, you better end this. As if she didn't really know, according to her testimony, that this relationship was going on. She only heard about it the first day of my opening statement. However, she did recall telling him to stop the relationship. And so at this point, about a week later, while he's at home doing the plumbing, Mika's gone off to the shower with the kids, he and Abigail are getting into some serious arguments over the phone. I'm just tired of fighting and being misunderstood. Start from the beginning. I'm sorry if I caused you to be lost. I hope you find your way back and find yourself. Abigail, I'm just tired of fighting and being misunderstood. I don't look forward to fighting or arguing. I never do. You don't listen to me. You just get mad at me. I'll work on it, but know that sometimes when you say something, it reflects to me the wrong way. You may just be talking freely, but at the same time, I'm feeling bad. I feel alone. Yeah, I feel alone too. But I can't keep it alive by myself. Not if you're on a different page now. You don't realize it, but your words you use at times hits me. We were never broken in the first place. I don't want to lose us. I hate this as much as you do. I'm tired of it and fed up with it. Those questions, by the way, those came from the heart. I asked those questions because I'm not ready to give up. So yes, I was waiting for your answers, holding my breath. My breath was flooded. Let me breathe again. Just a sampling. Just a sampling of that day alone. 6:54 p.m. Bird again messages his girlfriend, rushing to get Mila, then gig. 7 p.m. he arrives at the beach bar. About the same time, Cassandra Burrier, remember her? She works at the beach bar and sees him every Sunday. Bird appeared preoccupied, withdrawn, too quiet. Not his usual happy self. That night, that same night, he tells Anisha Delia. While Anisha Delia testified on the stand, that night, he told her, confided in her, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. I want a divorce. I married too young. You heard her testimony. That very night, he's confiding in his friends. She WhatsApps him and says, while she's sitting there, I know you're going to say hi to your favorite girl. I'm right in front of you. And then he confides in her. He's unhappy. He wants a divorce. By 10:30 p.m., Soul Vibes should end their gig. Remember they played there between 7 and 10. 11 p.m., Mark arrives there. 11:29 p.m., Bert takes a photo of their bar tab. The bar tab you'll see in evidence, $302. It's on his phone, and that's where we found it. 11:45 p.m., Ms. Sunga Snapchats him. We're at Cheers. We get to 12:05 a.m. After midnight. The first person Bert vibers when he's done is his girlfriend. Says to her, done with gig. Done with the gig. That's the little message. Done with the gig. Time to get together if you want, honey. Done with the gig. Shortly after that, before he leaves, he sends a photo of Bert, Marky, Rossetti, and Tianzon at the beach bar. 12:29 before he leaves, he WhatsApps Layla Uong, who testified here. I'm drunk. She replies, so what else is new? Bert WhatsApps his friend Ruth, where are you? Mika WhatsApps him for the first time, where are you? 12:39 a.m. At some point herein, Mika tries calling him. Does Bert take the call? No. Bert gives the phone to Rossetti to talk to his wife. Tell her we're done. I'm on my way home. We're almost done. 12:30-ish. She's still texting him, but WhatsApping him. Where are you? 12:40 p.m. Wow, no text at all to me while at the gig? That's Mika texting her husband because he's not talking to her. He's not responding to her messages. And she's saying, all night you've been at the gig and you didn't text me at all? Well, we know who he's texting. Where are you? Missed phone call at 12:41. 12:42. Mika calls Bert, and Bert hands his phone over to Jimmy Rossetti, who says in turn to Mika, "We're getting done, he'll be home soon." 12:45. Ruth says to Bert at abandoned ship. Shortly after, Bert sends back a message, "Okay, going abandoned." 12:47 on the video. Both Bert and Mark arrive at abandoned ship. Pull into the parking lot. On the video, Bert walks in the door at 12:49. Same time, shortly after, Mark walks past the front door and on the other side. 1 a.m., the abandoned ship cameras show us what's going on. Bert's taking selfies, walking in and out by 1:12. WhatsApp to Mr. Meno of their picture and some other WhatsApp messages. By 1:15 a.m., when they're about ready to leave or getting ready to leave the deck, as Mark is going outside, that's when he's supposedly at the mob as Mr. Cruz. And within feet after mobbing Mr. Cruz as he's trying to leave with his drink, he makes that comment to Pendleton. You see them walking around behind abandoned ship at 1:23, all on the side looking for the car. 1:24, you see them standing in front of Smoke and Totes. 1:30, Toby Gonzalez gives them a ride. 1:30, Kathy Rosala, by the way, has left her residence to go drop off her husband. 1:34, they get out of Toby's vehicle, out in the front by the deck. They hug, 1:34 in the morning. You'll see that on the camera. They leave abandoned ship at 1:41. That's also on the camera. 1:48, after he arrives shortly at abandoned ship, he replies to Abigail, "Okay." Keep in mind they left at about 1:41. Takes 22 minutes to get up to Jigo. We're now at 2:03 a.m. The earliest time they could have gotten to Jigo, 2:03 a.m. At about 2 a.m., Tomas Cruz, the neighbor from 150 feet away, hears men laughing, no one in distress, sounds like they're intoxicated. Between 2:05 and 2:10 a.m., Kathy Rosala passes by, no distress. 2:14 a.m., Layla sees some WhatsApp online. 2:14 a.m., Mark calls Julia's cell. 2:15 a.m. is the first 911 call, 4 seconds, inaudible, drop call. 2:16 a.m., 911 call, about 3 minutes. 2:18 a.m., pursuant to Julia's phone records, Mark leaves the message, "Par, I'm done, we're done. I don't even know how this happened." 2:20, another drop 911 call. 2:20 a.m., the 15-minute long call. 2:23 a.m., Julia sees Bert on the road with Mark holding 2 phones. Julia calls LT to come down. That's on Julia's phone at 2:23. At the same time, LT looks out the sliding door, glass door, sees down below, sees the top of Mark's face standing between the driver's door and the driver's seat. By 2:27 a.m., it's estimated, on the 911 call, that's by the time LT comes downstairs and takes the phone. By 2:33 a.m., that much is clear. GPD and the medics finally arrive. 2:40 a.m., ALS arrives. 2:45 a.m., the cops are doing their scene check. By 2:55 a.m., Bert has been transported to GMA. Let's take a look at the physical evidence. Although the timeline goes all the way until 4 p.m. when Mark is arrested, it's clear that from the time he goes to Naval Hospital, shown on the video. That's already about 3:40 p.m. or a.m. excuse me, and he gets to Navy Hospital, say by 4. Let's take a look at the physical evidence, because the physical evidence in this case does not support the government's theory of some drunken rage, agitated, gun going off in the passenger seat next to Mr. Piolo, chest wound directly to the chest. We don't dispute, and in fact we stipulated, we agreed to a lot of the evidence in this case. There's the blood evidence, blood everywhere, and it was Burke's. Only one person was injured. We didn't need an FBI expert to tell us that all the blood and all the vomit and all the substances were DNA tested and belonged to Burke. He's the only one injured, so it was pretty clear that it's going to be Burke's blood found. The blood was tested, it was photographed, it was swabbed. Some of it was tested, others weren't. We would highlight the blood evidence seen on the driver's side doorway. There's a lot of it on the driver's side. Consistent with the passenger not fully seated in the back. Take a look at this, ladies and gentlemen. Take a look at all that blood in the middle of the seat. It's not on the right hand side. There you go. There you go. Could Burke really be seated all the way in the chair when he was shot, to have all this blood in the middle of the back seat? In the middle of the seat. Totally inconsistent with their theory. Totally. Look at it. He selected certain photos to show you. Look at it, ladies and gentlemen. It's all the way over here. It's all the way over here. It can't get any clearer than this picture. Does that look like that he was in the driver's seat when he got shot? Wouldn't the blood be all the way over here? Right here on the part of the seat? The shoulder, if you will? No, it's in the middle. Consistent with somebody who leans out and falls back in. And throws up. Speculation here. Maybe he's looking for his phone. Maybe he's looking for his phone after he got shot. After he shot himself. Where's my phone? Leans back in. Vomits all over himself. And all in here. This is all vomit. There you go. Vomit. Not flesh, not meat. Consistent with the defense theory that he sat back in. Then threw up. Then did that happen on that part of the chair. Again, we highlight the lack of blood on the passenger seat. Very little thing. None was tested. None was tested and confirmed. Blood on the passenger seat. None was found on the passenger's door. If somebody used their right hand, because they're right-handed and they shot him, you would think there might be blood on the gun if it was so close. Okay? Then maybe when he opened the door as a passenger, you'd leave some on the passenger door, right? None. Zero. Zero blood on the passenger door. Zero blood on the driver's door. You know what that says? The driver's door is probably open when he got shot. If Bert had got shot while seated in there and probably went and tried to protect his wound, you think he'd open the door, the driver's door, to get out and leave blood? He'd just been shot. The first thing he's going to do is go like this and get blood all over him. The next thing he's going to do is he's going to open the driver's door to get out. Any blood in the driver's door at all? And they tested for it. Again, more consistent with the defense theory that he was shot while partially seated, not fully seated in the driver's seat, Marky in the doorway. The blood trail goes around from the door, driver's door, out to the ground, to the back, towards the wheel. We agree with that. Notably, a lot on the rear side, driver's side of the truck, on the ground. Exactly where Julius saw him on the ground. Exactly where Julius says she saw Bert on the ground. Marky holding 2 phones. The trail continues at the back. You see the trails as noted by Mark Torre on his diagram. The trail continues to the back of the SUV and the other truck. And then it goes around the side against the wall, up to the front. Both with Officer Taikenko, our government of Guam ballistics expert at GPD, 30 years, and with Bond Ride, our witness who we called, who's the GPD armorer. Both of them confirmed the defense theory of the case, of how everything landed where it did regarding the gun. First things first. That you first must lock the gun. Excuse me. You first must chamber the gun. We assume that there's 9 bullets in the magazine. Mr. Torre testified he doesn't carry it chambered. Why? Because it's the only safety. There's no safety on that gun. Nine bullets in the magazine. Put up there. There's no safety. In order to load it, lock and load it, in order to fire it, all the experts testified, the first thing you got to do is rack it. Hope I'm using the right words. You got to do is chamber it. Whoever is going to shoot this gun must first chamber it. Whoever chambers it must have a reason to do so. If Mark's going to chamber it and shoot him, and Mark's going to kill him, he's going to kill him. If Bert's going to chamber it and kill himself, he's got to shoot it. He's got to chamber it in order to fire the gun. So we have the first bullet that's chambered, shot. What happens? The casing comes out, right side, and if you're in the driver's seat, remember it's a 4x4, so it's a little on the ground. Marky's in the door side. You're tucking your stop, girlfriend, arguing, whatever it is. Pointing at you, pointing at you, wherever it's pointing. In an effort for Bert to resist Mark taking the gun. It's very easy to pull back away from Mark and shoot it down that way. Is that easy? Very easy. Subcompact gun. 5.5 inches. It's not a typical gun. Look at it. So the first bullet goes into Bert. And let's be clear. 90-degree angle? Didn't happen at a 90-degree angle. If it happened that way, we know where that bullet's going. Straight across. As Dr. Cohen testified, the 5th rib is very thin. Very thin. If it were at a 90-degree angle, it would have gone straight through, punctured the lung, plus perhaps landed in the heart or the other lung. Or maybe even on the other side. Dr. Cohen's very clear. Based on the angle of and the trajectory of the wound, Dr. Espinola and Dr. Cohen agree. Right to left. Right to left. Front to back. Downward. While Dr. Espinola believes You hit the rib and the bullet just goes. No, that doesn't make any sense at all. The bullet just travels in there. Much more sense at a 45-degree angle, downward. Downward. How difficult is that angle to achieve if you are seated on the passenger seat 7 inches back from the driver's seat? Okay? Remember, Officer Tenori was clear. The passenger seat was reclined 7 inches back. Birdie's up here, 7 inches up. How difficult is it for Marky to come up with this angle with the thing and go like that? If he was really just going to shoot him just like that, shoot him in the head. He ain't going to miss. The angle, the trajectory of the bullet supports the defense theory that he did it to himself in an effort to resist taking it away. Whether it's this way, or this way, or this way. It all works. It all works. Easily. Easily. It's not difficult. Not at all. How does the shirt get folded? Somehow or another it's in there. It's a new shirt. Easily shown on the defense demonstration. So then we have the accounting of the first casing that falls on the right there. Right there on the casing, on the sunshade. Mark leans in and takes the thing in order to clear it and make it safe. What's he supposed to do first? Drop the magazine. Drop the magazine and then clear it. And he's leaning into the car. Clear it. What happens? The one pops out. The government questioned, how does it land on the seat all the way over there? How does the ejected bullet land all the way over there? When you're standing at the driver's side, reaching in and clearing it, yeah, it's going to go there. Remember what both Officer Uride and Officer Taitenko also said. That when you fire the gun, the expended bullet pops out of there and only goes about a foot. What happens, he said, when you clear it and the unexpended bullet pops out? It goes several feet. It goes several feet. Why? It's a heavier bullet. It's going to travel further. The expended casing is just the casing. It's just going to drop right there. And that's what happens when it goes out. It drops right there. Where does it land? Where does the bullet land? After he clears it, all the way out. Then you also heard that if you don't clear the magazine, and you do that action of clearing the bullet, the other bullet comes up, like the Pez toy, and gets stuck there. So where is the third bullet? As Officer Taitenko found it. Stuck. First bullet, casing. Second bullet, cleared on the other seat. Third bullet, stuck. Because he failed to drop the magazine. 6 remaining bullets in the magazine. Both police experts in this field confirmed that theory. After hearing the government today, I still don't know what their theory is. How they account for all those bullets. At first they were saying it's a limp wrist thing. Then they were saying it was preloaded, but when they realized you needed 10 bullets for that, their theory changed again. Our theory, again, more consistent with the physical evidence regarding the bullets and the firearm. Recall, the firearm was found on the dashboard, facing that way, as if it had been placed there, far away from Bert enough so that he doesn't have to reach it. But what's noticeable in that gun? The magazine is in it. The magazine is still in there. Officer Taitenko testified when he pulled it out of there it is. You see it right there at the bottom. This is the part of the magazine right there. Not here. That's it. Not fully dropped. the resulting firearm evidence, where each bullet was found, where the gun was found, where the empty casing was found, where the unexpended bullet was found, supports the defense theory and does not at all support the government theory. Really, if he was sitting on his chair and he cleared it and that extra bullet popped out, how did it land under his butt? That's where it is, under his butt pretty much. It's on this side of the passenger seat. And he's clearing it, it would pop, according to the experts, a foot or so, a couple of feet. The empty casing is just going to drop. But the clearing of that empty bullet is going to pop out a few feet because it's heavier. How does it end up down here if you're seated on that seat? Then we have the body cam evidence. For the first few minutes, Mark's seen holding Bert, trying to help him, apply pressure to the wound, which is located, granted, in a difficult place. It's not right here where you can put on your gloves, as the medic said, and then apply pressure. That just ain't going to happen. How it's over here? According to the testimony from his dad, he was doing all he could, applying pressure, either this way or however it's shown in the video, holding on and applying pressure to the wound. Bert's not fighting with him, not telling him to move away, leave me the heck alone, you just shot me. And it's been about 20 minutes already before the call was made, by the time the police arrive and the body cam goes on. Bert appears in and out of conscious by the time the medics take him. LT says Bert was conscious and ambulating before they got there. Bert is eventually placed on the gurney, you can see that. And he has lost consciousness by that time, according to all the medics. He lost his vitals at about 2:55 a.m. and was pronounced dead at 3:22 a.m. Mark is seen at the tailgate of the truck. He's moved to the tailgate. He's questioned by Officer Edwards and Officer Flores, and you can see for yourself how very difficult it was for Mark to answer those questions. For the most part, according to both officers, he's dazed and confused. He's shaking his head. He's mumbling, pointing to the ground, that guy there, just not making any sense. Mark, on the video, really has no idea what just happened. Shows him in a state of shock. All witnesses attending to him noticed it. Even the firefighter, medic who took him in the ambulance, said it himself. He was in a blackout. That's that firefighter's word, not ours. That firefighter said that the day he was interviewed, long before any blackout became a public word. So firefighter Tenorio himself, when I asked to describe Mark on the ride in the ambulance, all he could say was he was just mumbling. I was just trying to help a friend. Kept mumbling that all the way out to the Navy Regional. Tenorio himself is the one who said Mark appeared as if he was in a blackout. Throughout much of the 40-minute body cam, he's unable to speak. You can see it in his face. He's wondering, what the fuck, Bertie, what the fuck? Pointing to the road, because that's where it happened. Bertie's truck is right in front of him. He keeps pointing at that road. What the hell are you doing to me, Bertie? What Mark does say in the video is the only consistent statement that we've heard throughout the trial. What does he say? He's asked by Officer Flores at the very beginning, did it happen inside the truck? Outside the truck? Because it didn't happen inside the truck or outside the truck. Bert was inside the truck. Mark was outside the truck. Mark also says at some point on that body cam, listen carefully. You're going to have to listen to it a few times maybe to see what you do and do not hear, because there is a significant dispute between the government's version of what they think they hear on both the 911 and the body cam tape and what we hear. For instance, we hear Mark saying, he didn't want to be a part of life. We see Officer Flores. Is it self-inflicted? Mark nods his head, yes. Mark says, that's the way that I never pointed it. He was unstable. Some kind of girlfriend. Party, it fucking killed me, it tripped me out. I told him to stop and he just let it loose. I told him to stop and he just let it loose. Mark is asked, was there a struggle? No, not even. No, there's no struggle. Did he point it at you? No. So he just stuck it to himself? Yes. Later on, he goes on to say, he wasn't even a threat. You weren't even a threat, Bertie. He's asked, you said he got into an argument with his girlfriend. Did they argue over the phone? He claimed they weren't even an item. He's asked, was there a verbal argument? No, not even. I didn't even argue with him. Mark is taken by ambulance over an hour later. Hour after this video starts, to Navy Hospital. He said to the attending medic, firefighter Tenorio, just trying to help a friend. He kept mumbling this over and over again. According to firefighter Tenorio, Mark, during that ride, was in a blackout. The body cam statements of Mark Torre and his version of events are the only consistent statements from that night. Bert was having girlfriend problems. I think that much is clear. That much is proven way beyond reason. Bert was having girlfriend problems and a wife, marital problems. That night he said, I'm unhappy, I want a divorce. He had said it earlier to his other good friend, Terry Tenorio. Mark told him to stop. He just stuck it to himself and just let it loose. Indeed, the other evidence, later found in all the cell phones and everything else, bears this out. The firearm evidence, again, we agree it's Mark's. Mark's got it. But did he shoot it? Did he shoot it? The FBI was brought in to confirm fibers on the gun are from Bert's shirt. That's pretty much a no-brainer too. The gun went through somebody's shirt. The only shirt it went through was Bert's. We didn't need the FBI from Quantico, Virginia to tell us, oh, by the way, the fibers found here came from that shirt. The FBI also gave us GSR testing, of course, to show the difference in how the residue was left on the shirt. They bought a bunch of similar shirts, conducted examinations in sterile settings at a 90-degree angle, and came up with similar things, similar showings to show that, in their professional opinion, the gunshot was between 1 and 3 inches. Does it really make a difference between contact wound and 1 and 3 inches? Maybe, maybe not. I think it shows that Dr. Spinola is just a little too confident in his own opinions, notwithstanding what the FBI analysis says. But yeah, either way, 1 inches up to 3 inches, or contact, either way. Fully capable. You see that? Nipple line. Right? How did that get there? How did that? Sitting in the. Not that hard. Not that hard at all. Either way, again, it's clear. Gun was very close. Consistent again with the defense theory. Not too consistent with the government's theory, though. If he's sitting on the passenger seat, he's at least not that close. How close is he? Unless he leans to the front and goes at that angle, that's the only way he's going to get within 1 to 3 inches. But if he's just seated in the passenger seat and racks it and goes like this, you're already 12 inches away. Totally inconsistent with the government's theory. Totally. Lack of gunshot residue. None taken from Mark. Mark was there all day from about 6 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. Officer Castro was specifically sent there to get it. Officer Castro goes there and takes pictures of Mark's clothes, and he sits there all day while Mark is sitting there with LT and with Jason Uggan in the room or outside on the balcony all day long. And what does Castro do? He never asks. You ain't gonna get it unless you ask. He admits, I was there all day waiting for someone to tell me to ask him. Really, dude? You were sent there to go get it. Go ask. You never asked. Just as importantly, the government never went and even took Bert's GSR. Bert went nowhere that morning. He was at GMH all morning from 3 a.m. onward. They all knew where he was. Not one of them, not Dr. Espinola, not Officer Castro, not any of the officers who attended the autopsy, once thought, hey, maybe we better check his hands just to make sure he may not have fired the gun. Because Mark is saying on the body cam ever since, he did it himself. Do you think for once the government would stop and think, well, maybe there's some truth to that before we rush to a judgment? Maybe we should just go see Bert's hands. He's there, the doctor's there scooping up blood out of his body cavity. How hard would it have been? Really? The lack of gunshot residue evidence. The burden's on them. They had every opportunity to get it, and they didn't. They'll claim, oh, well, Mark asserted his Fifth Amendment right, and therefore he refused. Wrong. He didn't refuse because he was never asked. And he didn't assert his Fifth Amendment rights until later in the afternoon by 4 or 5 o'clock when Officer Meyenberg already made the determination to arrest him. Let's not forget the most important firearms evidence, or the lack thereof in this case. No fingerprints. Oh, what's something to know who's holding the gun? Fingerprint evidence. And again, we'll never know if Bert's fingerprints are on there because they never even tested for Bert's. They never wanted to test for Bert's there. They only tested for Mark's fingerprints. They only went and got his fingerprints. They didn't go get Bert's fingerprints over at the firearms ID section where they're stored. Why again? They didn't want to know. In their rush to judgment, arresting him within 12 to 14 hours after the shooting occurred, they don't want to know any of the defenses. They're not interested in any of that. Well, you know, it affects their burden of proof. It affects their burden of proof. It shows that they're just rushing to judgment, wanting to convict one person and one person alone. Lastly, of course, is the physical evidence, all the photos. Take a good look at the autopsy photos again, ladies and gentlemen, because they do show where the wound is. They show everything that Dr. Cohen was talking about, Dr. Espinola are talking about, and it's very important. Very, very important that you take a look at that. They're not too graphic, they're not too difficult, especially the wounds and the location of where the bullet was. Common sense. The bullet just doesn't go like that. Downward. Common sense. It shows right there in the photo. Videos from abandoned ship, exterior and interior. We've given you still photos as well, just to compare the times and to confirm. This is when they arrived, this is when they left. It shows them again. Other than the physical evidence, all the photos, all the pictures, and the stuff, the evidence that you have in front of you is the 56 witnesses, the testimony. And you recall again, the first day of testimony included all these witnesses from abandoned ship and beach bar. And again, our position is that all of those witnesses show that they were all having a good time. They were both drinking a lot. We have Rose Calvo, the governor's daughter, showing up, Eddie Tianzon and Ruth Sunga. You might remember them from the very first few days. Then we get to abandoned ship. and viewed all kinds of camera footage for about a whole day or two. We even got a tutorial from Miss Crystal Paco, who's appearing on that video. Remember, the prosecution said in his opening that Mark committed the murder in some type of drunken, angry, belligerent outburst of fit or rage. The only evidence of angry, belligerent outburst is witnesses Cruz, Jackson, and Pendleton regarding Mark and Bert abandoned ship. The only evidence of anger or belligerence, and belligerence, by the way, is their term. None of the witnesses used that word belligerence. All they could say was angry. And by angry, they meant, number one, he acted bob at me twice. He didn't say anything when done. Just acting bob at him. Drunk. Acting bob at him. Before, as he passes Mr. Cruz, the owner of the bar, he comes across, before he gets out of the deck, he comes across the next, the bouncer, his inferior over at the guard, Mr. Pendleton. And he says to him, "Don't let me slap your fucking face." This bouncer, Pendleton, already told Jackson, the bigger guy, that he, watch out, my LT's in there and he's acting like an asshole or a dickhead. And that's because, according to this witness, he already saw Mark inside clapping, having a good time and drinking. And according to that witness, that's what makes him an asshole or a dickhead, having a good time. I think what that shows is that the respect between the two was not mutual. That's for sure. But a power check, an atambaba, is no reason for Mark to go and shoot and kill his brother. That's for sure. AG went to great lengths to show why. Why would Marky do this? All they can claim, he was belligerent and angry to the point of wanting to shoot him, and so drunk, extremely drunk. They keep using the word, wasn't he extremely drunk, as if to convince you that being so drunk is extreme indifference. Make no question about it, make no doubt about it. Being extremely drunk is not equivalent to extreme indifference to the value of human life. All of us get drunk at one point or another. It doesn't mean we have extreme indifference to the value of human life. There's no rage or belligerence in Mark that night at abandoned ship. Indeed, it shows him having a good time. Or that the government's other argument is that Mark was flirting with the girls, buying Rosé Calvo, the governor's daughter, a drink at Beach Bar, and then, of course, making the comment to Crystal Paco, "So you think you're hot shit?" Take a look at that video again. It's funny because you see Marky lean into Crystal and say, "So you think you're hot shit?" And what does she do? She high-fives him. Take a look at the video again. How could she be so offended by that rude comment? And she's high-fiving him as soon as he says it. Of course she thinks she's hot shit. She's Crystal Paco. It's not a rude comment. No offense, of course, ladies. No offense at all to professionals being told, "Hey, you think you're hot shit," but as a practical matter, when you're high-fiving the guy who says it to you, I don't think she really took that much offense, despite her testimony. Again, saying such comments, as offensive as they may be, yes, that's offensive. I'm going to say that to a woman. Provides no evidence, however, of a reason to kill her. We then heard from Layla Uwam, who works with the Lieutenant Governor's office, and she testified and confirmed that, Bert messaged her early in the morning, 1 in the morning sometime, what's going on at work tomorrow, and his last message was, "I'm drunk." Last message to his co-worker was, "I'm drunk." Her response, what else is new? Sean Meno at 1:15 a.m. gets a WhatsApp message from Bert, a picture of all of them. And so he confirms that while Bert was out, he receives the picture on WhatsApp. The interesting thing about Sean Meno is that he confirmed he's Mark's commanding officer. He's Mark's boss in the guard. Mark is his number 2. And what did he say about Mark and his performance? He rated him outstanding. Fallon Falabru is the bartender. She came in and testified. She knows both of them from their appearances in the bar. No arguments or fighting. Everybody, again, having a good time. John Edwards took the stand on the third day of trial. And he's the police officer who first arrived. And he's the only police officer on Guam who's been allowed to wear a body cam. I guess as of late he's not allowed to wear a body cam anymore, but he's the one who wore the body cam in this case. And he was the only cop at the time who was given special permission by the chief of police to actually use that body cam. He confirmed his very good friendship with Mark Torre. Confirmed that he had been with the Phoenix police for about 3 years, and confirmed and told us how his body cam works. Press it, 20 seconds, take delay on the sound, and eventually it goes back 20 seconds and then plays. Testified of how he saved it to his hard drive, made a copy. And it took him a long time because, according to him, it wasn't until 3 or 4 p.m. that day. 3 or 4 p.m. that day when he finally was able to turn the thumb drive over to Officer Mary Jane Raval. You remember Mary Jane Raval confirmed that yes, it was not until 4 p.m. or such that she turned over the body cam video. The body cam video that was played for you, as well as the 911 call, ladies and gentlemen, were both FBI enhanced. That's not the regular tape that we pay for. All these videos and audio were sent to the FBI and enhanced so that we can hear them as best we can. John Edwards confirms in my cross-examination of him all the statements that Marky made on that body cam, just as I repeated in big. All the statements that I highlighted in my closing today and in my opening statements. Officer Edwards confirmed Mark made all those statements in the body cam. The next witness was Officer Barry Flores, the lead officer of the group. He arrived at Chalanorencia, and he was the one who first questioned Mark. He noted Mark's condition, intoxicated, didn't finish his sentences, speaking incoherently from the times you could hear him. His speech was slurred. Officer Flores knew both Bert and Mark, and he was shocked at the incident. Mark was never a suspect. The timelines on the body cam are consistent and accurate for 49 minutes of body cam video as Officer Flores first arrived. As we noted in our cross-examination of Officer Flores, he did everything above board, by the book, been around a long time. He's a straight shooter as he testified in court. And although he may be related to the Torre family, any suggestion by the prosecution that this Dedido Precinct lead officer may have compromised the investigation or may have been compromised is simply unwarranted and outright. Officer Barry Flores, as he testified, no special favors. He played it by the book, and he's shown on the video playing it by the book. The next several witnesses we heard from were all the GFD medics. We heard from the 2 medics who came and who first came and took Bert away on the gurney. Both of them confirmed. By the time they arrived at about 2:33, 2:35 a.m. and retrieved Bert, he had already begun to lose consciousness. He did not say anything to either of them the entire time. By the time they arrived, he was already, according to Officer GFD firefighter Scambaluri, he was in a quick decline. When they hooked up, his heart rate was already low. They attempted to revive him and he never responded. His vitals went out so quick, right when he hooked him up. By the 2:53 a.m. departure time, Bert was never revived. Pronounced dead at 3:22 a.m. at GMH. GFD officers Gil Almario and Marvin Cruz also testified. They're the ones who first met Mark on the tailgate and attended to him later on by about 3:30 in the morning. Again, they confirmed Mark was not injured. They lifted his shirt to check for any injuries and they saw the blood there. When asked, Mark, were you involved in any type of altercation? No, not even. Mark said continuously, I was trying to help a friend. Said it to Officer Amahorio. Said it again to Officer Tenorio, firefighter Tenorio, in the ambulance consistently. No, I didn't. I didn't even argue with him. Said the same thing to Marvin Cruz. No, not even. GBE Officer Alex Blanquisco came before us. He only appeared for a few minutes to testify that he went to GMH to determine the time and cause of death, and was advised by Dr. Baasan at GMH ER that Mr. Piolo had expired at 3:22 a.m. Mr. Blanquisco also noted, however, he's been Mark's supervisor at Tumon Precinct ever since Mark's been there. He's Mark's boss. He confirmed that he rated Mark outstanding on all his personnel evaluations. Deanne Torre testifies next, and she tells you what she remembers from that night, from picking up the phone, giving it to her husband, eventually eventually looking out the window herself, seeing what she sees, and eventually walking down and assisting Julia in just going back in the house and taking care of things there. She confirms she hears the phone ringing, or sees the phone ringing, hands it to her husband, wakes him up. He answers and says, "Okay, I'll be down." Changes his clothes, looks out the window, changes his clothes, and goes down. She gets out of bed, looks out the window, and can see, again, her son, someone out in the front of the truck. Goes downstairs and attends to with Julia. Appeared to be a problem, a situation. "Son, are you okay?" "Yeah, Mom." "No, Mom, I got him." "What's going on, son? You okay?" "Yeah, Mom, I got him." That's about the extent of her testimony and her view that morning. Carl Cruz, the officer, testifies that he interviewed Julia. Julia stated to him that she went to bed, that Marky left at about 10 o'clock, 10:30, to Beach Bar to meet up with his friends. She woke up at about 2 a.m. to the cell phone ringing and the dogs barking. She could hear Mark's voice outside. Remember, she's on the first floor, the ground floor there. She saw Bert from far away, out by the truck, where he said to her, "Help me." She exits the gate area and walks out toward the truck on the road, where she eventually comes around the driver's side and sees Marky and Bert on the ground. Mark's holding two phones. Consistent with what we heard on the 911 call. Somebody's talking both ways. Somebody's making phone calls back and forth. 214, 215, 216, 217, 218, 219, 220, 221. All the different phone calls going back and forth. While Chirika Charbalov could not confirm whether it was on speakerphone or not, clearly you can tell from the voices, the background voices, somebody's holding two phones. That was confirmed by Officer Cruz as Julia made that statement. She calls her father-in-law at 2:23 a.m. That's shown on her phone records. He can come down to assist, and shortly after he does, he's heard on the 911 call, eventually taking over the phone call. Yes, we're
Take a short break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take a 15-minute break, and we will resume with the continued closing by the defense counsel. Just please leave your notebooks on your chair. They'll be there in the drive through the gate.
I don't mean to alarm you or anything with the use of the gun. Just to show you, it does have this thing. There's not even bullets, live bullets in the courtroom in order to prevent any type of accidents. And so I apologize if at all anyone was felt alarmed by my use of the gun. That's the way it is. But it is the best method of what the point I'm trying to make. And that it is entirely possible for the shooting to go off in the manner in which we described. The other witnesses presented in this case include Mark Tenorio. Mark Tenorio, you'll recall, is from CSI. He prepared the diagram where he showed all the blood and all the different location of everything, the 2 cars in the driveway, Bert's truck on the roadway, various spots of blood. Again, consistent with the defense theory that he was shot in the driver's seat, all the blood on the door, his hat falls out there by the driver's door, blood goes around this way, a large pool, as Officer Flores, as all the officers testified to, exactly where he was found and seen on the ground by Julia. You see them walking around again at large concentration. This actually goes this way, kind of. If you look at the pictures, a large concentration at the back of the SUV, a little bit here again, a little bit here, and then a lot, actually up the road, up the side of the wall and in the front. That diagram was the same one used by the 3D experts as well as the defense reenactment and demonstrations in terms of deciding spaces, deciding the location of the truck and the like. We also note that Mr. Tenorio was the one who clarified and measured the seat back of the passenger seat in the truck. He's the one who measured it 7 inches, I believe, 6 or 7 inches was his testimony, from the passenger's headrest to the rear seat headrest. And as Investigator Bloss testified, we did the same thing in positioning the seat 7 inches back, 7 inches between the passenger's headrest and the rear seat headrest. It's pretty far back. It's pretty far back. Officer Ronel Rivera also testified, and a detective investigating the case. He knows both Mark and Bert, part of the SWAT Brotherhood, tasked in charge of the crime scene, and he assisted Tenorio in collecting evidence, confirming the trail of blood, the driver's door side, and the driver's side, the rear wheel area, and he described the different types of blood seen, droplets, pools, concentrate, splatter, spatter, the different terms used for blood. Officer Quang Chang testified as well that he's the one who went up to Navy Hospital to retrieve Mark's clothing. He was sent at about 6:07 a.m. 6:07 a.m. they went to get his clothing. Found in a bag that was presented to him, Mark was seen in the passenger seat of the truck, asleep, where he signed for Officer Chang the custody receipts. Officer Chang also interviewed Dr. Liebhart over at Navy Hospital, and Dr. Liebhart confirmed Marky's mental status, Dr. Liebhart indicating that Mark never mentioned what happened, appeared to be hyperventilating, said, I'm in shock, I don't know what happened, there's so much blood on me. He confirms that Dr. Liebhart NRMC records determined Mark's blood alcohol content, 0.26 at about 4 a.m. He admitted Exhibit 42, which is Mark's medical records from NRMC. Review those carefully because they again confirm that Marky did not necessarily know what was going on or why he was even there at NRMC that morning. Ray Alcantara also testifies. He received the clothing and picked up some of the items over at the scene. He found Bert's shirt, the t-shirt and the tank top, crumpled up, I believe, up against by the wall in the front of the truck. He opened up the shirt and you could tell clearly on both shirts, lots of vomit, lots of blood. It was very clear that those shirts had been used to press against Bert's wound, as seen by Lieutenant Torre. Then we have all the FBI witnesses. FBI Agent Friedman, FBI Trace Evidence Unit, designated as an expert in hair and fibers, again, came all the way from the FBI to tell us that the fibers found on the muzzle of the gun are the same as Bert's shirt. Once again, we're shown that the gun was held close to the shirt, close to his chest, and more than likely from some type of downward angle. Gil Medea testified, provided a bunch of photos as well, and custody receipts showing what was received in evidence. Agent Fletcher, FBI DNA forensic examiner, testified as an expert in forensic serology and DNA analysis, serology, testing of the blood, Again, he gave us a good tutorial on DNA, it knows who we are. No two DNA is the same. You can find it on dried pieces, on live pieces, body cells. Months later, you can still get a profile. The differences in tandem repeats and the like. He gave us a nice explanation of how DNA works and how he performed DNA testing in this case. Again, Bert is the source of all the vomit on the driver's seat, the console, and the contributor to the vomit on the hood of the other truck. There is no blood. No blood, according to Jeremy Fletcher, on the interior driver's door, glove compartment, and the passenger door. Consistent again. With the driver's door being open, lack of blood on the passenger door shows the passenger may not have fired the gun. All blood and vomit DNA was Bert's, and that's pretty clear. Bert was the only one injured. Brett Mills, FBI firearms tool mark expert, did the reconstruction, if you will, bought 6 different shirts that were similar to Bert's shirt, tested it at a 90-degree angle in lab conditions, and confirmed, in his expert opinion, the gun was at least 1 inch to 3 inches from the wound. 1 inch to 3 inches from the wound. Certainly not over by the passenger seat, more than a foot away. No way. Way too far for any of the witnesses to testify. It was either contact, according to Dr. Espinola, which is actually touching, contact, or 1 to 3 inches, as testified by the FBI experts. And again, what's interesting and what's very important is that he tested it at a 90-degree angle. John Siriano, again, testified as the government's expert, 30 years as a ballistics expert, and again, compared the gun, compared the bullets. Yes, the bullet in his body in Bert's body came from Mark's gun. Again, Officer Tykenko, who confirmed the defense theory of how the guns operate and how those bullets landed where they landed. Julie Polino testified as the fingerprints examiner. Her findings very key. No prints. No prints of that. And again, we didn't even test Bert's prints, so we couldn't even tell if Bert's prints were even there. Jessica Meyenberg testifies as the officer, the detective assigned to go arrest and interview Mark Torre by about 4 p.m. Her other assignment included making sure all of Bert's weapons were accounted for. She had a hard time testifying to that, but I think we made it pretty clear all present and accounted for. After meeting prosecutors on July 13th, Monday, 2015, at about 4 p.m., after meeting with prosecutors and investigators, according to her, the decision was made to arrest Mark. He had been over at Teton since early morning. Her arrest of Mark Torre Jr. was based strictly, according to her testimony, strictly on the 911 call. Talk about a rush to judgment. Within 12 hours after the call, after the shooting, Mark is arrested based strictly on the 911 call. She was told to interview and arrest him. Mark was in the family, in a room at Teton with his family. He'd been there since 6 or 7 a.m., and she knew that. He was arrested by 4 p.m. And the rush to judgment was well on its way. Sean Ojuzu did a neighbor's check. He prepared the Google map, the correct one of the area in Jigo. He confirmed where Tomas Cruz's house is located in relation to the Torre residence. All of the neighbors that he checked, no one saw anything, no one heard anything. Apparently, we learned later, he didn't interview Tomas Cruz, the closest neighbor nearby. Connie Cruz testifies from Docomo. She brings in all the call records, and she gives us evidence as to all of Bert's phone records and all of Mark's cell phone records. Julia calls LT at 2:22:57, according to their phone records. That's already 3 minutes into the 911 call. 4 minutes later, LT picks up the phone and takes over, which is already 9 minutes after that call after, excuse me, the first shot may have been, after the first 911 call was made. Excuse me. Essentially, by the time LT picks up the phone, according to the 911 records, according to the timestamps on all the phone calls, the second 911 call was made at approximately 2:20. He is heard on the 911 call at 7:13. That would be 2:27. Already 14 minutes. 14 minutes after 2:14. That's a long time. According to the doctors, by the time LT gets on the phone, 14 minutes after Bert had been shot, Bert had already been experiencing shock the first 2 minutes after being shot. Bert experienced a very massive amount of blood loss. That massive amount of blood loss, according to the doctors, the real doctors, results in lowering of his blood pressure, and eventually, according to Dr. Cohen, ends up being delirious. According to Dr. Stewart, delirium is defined as incoherence. Incoherent. By the time Bert says he shot me, he shot me. And let's be clear, listen to it all over again. You only hear it twice. You only hear it twice. You don't hear it 3, 4, 5 times like Mr. McDonald said. Play it again. Play it and listen carefully. You hear it at 7 minutes, 13 seconds into the second 911 call. 2:27:13. That's already 13, 14 minutes after the gun was shot. Clearly, he's delirious. AG investigator A.D. Camacho got on the stand and produced the call, the phone message left on Julia's phone. He acknowledged that that phone message was provided by the defense. They didn't ask us for it, we just provided it to them because we knew it's an important piece of evidence in this case. It's a call made to her with a voice message that says, clearly, listen to it. I'm done. We're done. We don't even know how this happened. Replay it. 2:21 a.m. I'm done. We're done. Don't even know how this happened. Mary Jane Raval, the lead case agent from the Guam Police Department, testified in this case. Although she's the lead case agent, this is her first homicide, and she's primarily a juvenile investigator for 6 years. Her primary role in this case was to take care of the search warrant with the phone companies, and she provided all the different call logs. What's clear in her call logs, again, from Bert's phone, the first call, 911, 2:15 a.m., dropped call. Second call to 911, 2:17 a.m., 2 minutes, 52 seconds, about 3 minutes. Third call to 911, 2:20 a.m., 15 minutes, 30 seconds. First call, drop call, 9:15. Excuse me, 2:15 a.m. Second call, 3 minutes. Chalanidencia, 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 chalanidencia. 7 times. Count it. 7 times Bert says to go to the wrong place. We don't know who lives in Chalanidencia, but it's 9 miles away. It's closer to his house. He's asked, the first thing Sharika or somebody asked him, where is your residence? Not where you at. Where is your residence? Chalanidencia, Chalanidencia, Chalanidencia. All the cops are already at Chalanidencia. 5 of them. Who's in shock? Who's delirious at that point? It's not Marky sending them to Chalanidencia. There's nobody else. Who's delirious within the first few minutes? Lieutenant Torre testifies for the government, his dad. He testifies about everything that happened that day. And he consistently testifies about that. The next time we call him as a witness as well. Testifies about looking out the window, what he sees, where he sees it, from what vantage point. First gets the phone call, sees it's somebody, sees it's Julia calling, answers it. Dad, can you come down here? Phone logs show that's about 2:18 a.m. on her phone, calling Dad's number. At that point, she sees Bert on the ground and Mark holding two phones. Takes him a few minutes. He gets down to the bottom of the landing in the garage carport. Takes him about 30 feet away, the gate. The defense demonstration shows his vantage point. Sees Bert at the front of Mark's truck, the Dodge truck that's pulled all the way up to the gate, leaning back on it, holding up the shirt, bundled up the shirt, holding it up. At some point, he notices Bert's wound. Doesn't appear to be bleeding, appears to be clear. And Bert turns towards his left, and goes towards Mark, who's right there. You can hear him coming on the phone, and do the time yourself. What time he picks up that phone? It's already 7 minutes into the second 911 call. And he stays on the phone for another 7 minutes until the ambulance gets there. And gets them to the correct location. He truthfully testifies that at some point he puts on his dad hat. He's no longer a police officer, he's a dad. And he's simply comforting, talking to his son, maintaining composure, and comforting his son who's just been through something very, very, very horrible. Until the medics arrive, he tells us that Mark is holding up Bert, that Bert is conscious, that Bert is ambulatory at the time, and that Mark is in control. He testifies it may not have been a textbook setting where you got to put on your gloves and then apply pressure like the medic said. But under the circumstances, seeing them at the time, Mark was clearly applying pressure from his arm, from his hands, whichever position he had it, in the best way possible, considering the circumstances. Guam's own Dr. Aurelia Espinola testifies in this case. Our chief medical examiner for more than 22 years, doing about 3 to 7 homicides per year, 600 total exams per year, to determine the cause and manner of death. He's qualified as the only forensic pathologist in the island and actually in the region. He's all we got. He is Guam's chief medical examiner, an official of the government of Guam. And he testified and prepared his autopsy report that the purpose of the report was to determine the cause and manner. And his statement was that the cause of death was a contact gunshot wound into the abdomen, and that the manner of death, was homicide. He testified as to how he conducted his examination in the presence of approximately 5 interns, 4 police officers, 1 other employee, Mr. Aquino, and a whole audience that he was teaching, if you will, or presenting to during the course of his very fast autopsy. He examined the external wounds and the external injuries to the body, no signs of a struggle, and no one claimed there was a struggle. Nobody said they're fighting. Struggle as in struggle for the gun, resistance for the gun. No struggle, no fighting, and we didn't expect to find any, and neither did, and indeed, the ME didn't find any evidence of a struggle or defensive wounds, if you will, from Mr. Piolo. That's no big deal. Nobody ever claimed they struggled or fought. He showed us his diagram and described the diagram. Told us that he found the bullet on the back. The bullet went from front to back, right of the victim, left of the victim, downward. According to him, it was a 90-degree entry wound. It hits the rib, the fifth rib, counting from the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It fractures the rib, shows us the picture of the fractured rib, but then it goes to the rib. That's how he explains it. The bullet just travels, goes anywhere, according to him. Goes anywhere. He had to amend his report. Despite our efforts to get him to admit that, it wasn't until investigator Bloss said, hey, you got some problems with your report, you need to change this. Say left to right, because it's not on the right, it's on the left. And also indicate the presence of soot, because you didn't indicate the presence of soot. And so Dr. Espinola admits that in January 2016, 6 months later, he changes his report and he amends it. We provided you both versions. What does he say about his amendments? It's typo. It's typo. Left to right is a typo? The presence or absence of soot in the wound is a typo? Take a look at it for yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Ain't no typo. That's a major mistake. It's a major mistake. Dr. Espinola quickly, very quickly stated to the prosecutor, oh, not suicide, not accidental, not undetermined, not inconclusive. He took the blood sample from the chest cavity by scooping it up with a cup. How kosher is that? According to Dr. Cohen, no, you're supposed to take it from the syringe and take it out of the body, put it in a certain container, mark it with the gray cover so that we test it for BAC as opposed to the green little tube cover or the red little tube cover. When they take your blood at the clinic, we always put a different color on the top of the thing. Why? Because it tells you what we're testing for. In this case, no, he didn't. He just scooped it up from the cavity. Not concerned about contamination. What else was in that cavity? If not vomit, liquid, blood, whatever. Tests it 2-3 days later. It's sent, according to the records, July 15th, and it's not tested until July 17th. That's already 4 days later. Showing 2.5 high. His interpretation is 0.025 at 3:30 a.m. when the blood was taken. Totally inconsistent with the number of drinks he had, according to Dr. Cohen. Serious room for contamination, either with the IV or with by virtue of the fact that he scooped it up from the cavity. And more importantly, inconsistent with the evidence. $302 bar tab at 12 midnight, plus all these other shots at abandoned ship. Dr. Espinola was very clear. He relied solely on the body to make his determination. He did his examination in a vacuum, as testified to by Dr. Cohen. And you don't do that. You don't do that in a homicide case where one cop is accused of shooting another cop. You find out everything. You look at the crime scene. According to Dr. Espinola, no, I didn't need to look at the crime scene. Didn't need to see where the blood was. Didn't need to see who was sitting where who might have shot the gun, where the blood came from, where the blood went. Just look at the body. Just look at the body. Didn't need to see the 911, to hear the 911 tape, although that's the only evidence he was told about. in the autopsy by the officers present, they didn't tell him about the body cam, they didn't tell him about nothing, except the 911 call. Took him only 30 minutes in front of 4 or 5 students. He's very fast. I'm fast, very fast. He would not agree with me that it's important to have as much information as possible before making your determination. Presence or absence of gunshot residue on the hand. That's not important. Gunshot powder residue inside the wound tract. That's not important, although he amended his report to include it. Before making an opinion about the cause of death, wouldn't it be important to know the psychological or mental state of the victim? Nope. I don't need to know if he wanted to kill himself, if he was arguing about a girlfriend, or if he even pointed it at himself. Not according to this medical examiner. He was not aware Piolo was suffering from stress in his marriage, telling people he wanted a divorce that night. Or of his simultaneous 3-year relationship with Abigail Regis. He did not view the body cam, didn't see Mark holding him, giving pressure to his wound, attempting to help him. When initially interviewed, he assumed and stated that they were side by side. When he testified, he says, oh, they were both seated in the truck side by side. At trial, he changed his opinion as to whether they were standing side by side, seated side by side, or any other version of being side by side. He confirmed the direction of the bullet. Right to left, down back, front to back, downward. But he would not confirm the trajectory was at a 45-degree angle or any angle. According to him, 90 degrees is the way it went in, and then it went boom. He didn't consider that the 5th rib is a very thin bone, and that if you do shoot a .40 caliber within 1 inch, it's going to go straight through, according to Dr. Cohen. And Dr. Cohen's the expert, the real expert in shooting autopsies, in firearms autopsies. That's all he does. He represents the County of Napa and the County of Sonoma Sheriff's Departments. All he does is investigate police shootings with their guns. Whether it's a victim being shot, a suspect being shot, a fellow officer being shot, that's all Dr. Cohen investigates. Shooting autopsies. He is the expert in the field. Anthony Camacho then testified as the government's expert, as the government's investigator, and presented their 3D version. Now remember, we had Mr. Dustin here, who was about to present the 3D version, but instead Mr. Camacho testified about it. He testified how they met Mr. Dustin several months ago, around the time of the incident, and he was providing a free show. He was marketing his program to law enforcement, specifically probably the traffic highway reenactment people. And he offered, generous of him, to offer his 3D services avatar program for the government that wanted to use in this case. And so investigator Camacho provided him with all the information, the pictures, the measurements, the photos, and the reports. And first of all, they presented 2 different theories, 2 different hypotheses, as it says on paper. And as we know, an hypothesis is simply an assumption. It's an assumption. It's based on assumptions. And the government based it on a couple of assumptions. They showed us 2 hypotheses. I remember, however, that I cross-examined him and asked him, how many did you prepare in total? He would confirm at least 4 to 6. 4 to 6 different theories of what went down in that car before we finally come up with the last one, presented to you in this case. In the first several, I asked Agent Investigator Camacho, isn't it true you had Marky pushing his head down and then shooting him this way? Or shooting him with both arms, left hand, right hand, different scenarios, different theories of how it went down. Reaching around this way and shooting him from the passenger seat. Just different theories. And the important thing to note is that their theory keeps changing. And as of today, we're hearing yet another theory that somehow or another, right, he just blew up. He just went nuts somehow, drunk in rage. Inconsistent with their own theories that they presented them throughout the months. Lucas Ferris was an officer who testified as to the luminol testing, and he confirmed on the dashboard cover, a little spot there and a little spot here. Also confirmed on the commentary, yeah, that's blood, looks like blood, tested for blood, is blood. Lieutenant Phil Camacho comes in and explains the 911. He's the officer in charge of the 911. He testifies about a memo that whenever you look at the 911 calls, add 22 minutes to it. So that's the only on Guam rule that the 911 system needs to add 22 minutes. Making it a little more difficult for us to tell the real time, but I think you all get the picture. Add 22 minutes to the time, and you'll get the real time. Charika Lou Chargaloff testifies and provides all the 911 calls. And again, she's the one on the phone, she's the one who operates it. Again, she confirms all of Mark's statements made on the 911 call. 3 calls from Bert's phone. 2:15, hanging up. 2:17, 3 minutes. 2:20, 15 minutes. Again, she confirms it's not until 7 minutes into the 3rd call. 7 minutes into the 3rd call, 2:27. That Bert says to LT, he shot. 14 minutes, 13 minutes after the initial shooting. According to both the Dr. Cohen and Espinola, within minutes after being shot, Bert's in shock, likely to vomit, able to move around. Indeed, he was moving around. Very feisty, bleeding out. Lots of blood loss, resulting in a loss of blood pressure, and eventually, according to both medical doctors, delirium. Incoherent, dazed, confused. Listen again to the 911 call. The government types it out as saying, I'm dying. LT, help me. Listen again. I heard it again yesterday in the case. Sounds to me he's now asking, am I dying? Am I dying? And that's why LT says, no, you're not. No, you're not. He's questioning if he's dying. Listen to it again. Is he saying, I'm dying, or am I dying, am I dying? Yesterday I heard something totally different, and I encourage you to use your own common sense in listening to what's really being said, and confirm for yourself who is saying what. We presented our defense case in chief with Tomas Cruz. The government didn't present him. Luckily, we were able to present him. He's the neighbor who lives about 150 feet away. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, he hears from his tin house. No windows on the house, only curtains. The door was open, again, only covered by a curtain. Clearly, at 2 in the morning, he could hear gentlemen intoxicated and laughing. No distress. Clearly, after 2 a.m., he recalls that. Slept the rest of the night in the air-conditioned room and didn't wake up the next day. Cassandra Burrier, Beach Bar, again, saw these people. Saw Bert, appeared preoccupied and withdrawn. Anisha Delia testified, another Saipan resident. She was there with them that night at the Beach Bar with Terry, Tenorio, and Denise. Every Sunday she's a fan. She goes and watches. Bert's like a brother to her. Confided in her that very night, after 7 p.m., confided in her. He's unhappy. He wanted a divorce. He married too young and wanted to do things. She may have said, testified, no, he's not suicidal, but really, can any of us really tell? Can any of us really sit there and say why someone kills themselves? Are we required to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Bert was suicidal? We're not required to prove any of that at all. But our evidence shows that he was distraught, he was sad. He says himself he's unhappy. Again, Von Uribe testifies. Very good witness, very convincing witness, clearly showed how much of a fan he is of the firearm. And again, confirms the defense theory of how the gun was loaded, fired, cleared, then jammed. Both he and Officer Tykecka confirmed someone had to chamber it in order to fire it. Someone has to have a reason to do that. Officer Jason Uggan testified after Lieutenant Torre testified. And again, related to Mark and LT, also a member of the SWAT team, called up to Navy Hospital early that morning where he met up with Mark and LT in the emergency room. Stayed all morning, waited for GPD to retrieve the clothes. Mark, he fell asleep in the car. When the cops arrived, they gave the bag to Officer Chang. Mark signed the custody receipts and not questioned at all at the time. They drove thereafter to GPD. He went to go get some food. He met LT and Mark at GPD in Teason. Went to GPD all day and waited all day from about 6 a.m. to about 4 or 5 p.m. According to him, 5 p.m. it was already dark by the time they processed Mark. Our next witness was Kathy Rizala. Kathy Rizala, our visitor from Saipan, who the defense brought in that day to testify and to present her story of what she remembers. As you'll recall, Agnes Blasky told us that she's a very important witness. We even went out there to go see her and to interview her and to get her testimony and her sketch while it was still fresh in her head. She came to Guam and testified in this case, and she testified truthfully and very clearly. Very clearly. She's been here several times before. Her sister lives up in Jigo, just around the corner from the Torres. She was here that weekend for a wedding. Her husband caught the 2:30 a.m. flight. He always catches, or they normally catch that red-eye flight. They had to get to the airport by 2:30. By 1:30. According to her, it takes about 30 to 40 minutes to drive back. Her recollection is that they got to the airport by 1:30 and dropped them off by 1:30. She returns to Jigo, taking about 30 to 40 minutes. We are now at already 2 a.m. to 2:10 a.m. 2 a.m. to 2:10 a.m. by the time she gets to Jigo. She testified about the route she took, comes upon San Tomas Ande, from behind, sees the car on the road, tail lights on, driver's door open, parked mostly on the road. Street light may have been on up above. She sees as she approaches, 2 men coming out from the driveway area. She clearly knows, as of that day, who they were. She saw their pictures on TV. She was clear, very clear, that yes, that was Mark, and yes, that was Bert. And Bert was in front of Mark and shoulder, and Mark was in back. She described the route they took, and she provided her own sketch. She drew her own sketch. She signed it and dated it. She showed us the 2 of them here. She even draws the arrow to show where they walk. She depicts her car, her notes, 3/4 on the road, 1/4 on the grass. We waved to her. She was very clear, waving to her as if, sorry to block the road. As if, oh, we'll move the car. As if we'll close the door. Car windshield not tinted, passenger door tinted. 5 to 10 seconds for her to pass.